We're here to talk about the credit for wages paid to returning citizens, which, as I'll discuss here in a second, is actually a name change for the credit as well, um, which is, I think, arguably a more appropriate name for this credit. But before we get into the specifics, required disclaimer from the department. So this basically just says that I'm not providing legal advice today, and that you should pursue legal advice, or if you're looking for legal advice, you should pursue legal counsel or other professional advice when seeking guidance. So the changes to the credit for wages paid to returning citizens was included in Public Act 103-592. And that was the 2024 what we call the revenue package. So it's an omnibus bill that contained roughly 20 to 30 tax law changes to existing statute. So this was one of those 20 to 30 provisions. And this particular provision amended the Illinois Income Tax Act, in particular Section 216, which is where you would find the language related to the credit we're discussing. And also, as Elliot noted, this is effective for tax years beginning in 2025. So as I noted, there was a name change. Previously, it was a credit for wages paid to ex-felons. Again, as I noted, probably more appropriate credit for wages paid to returning citizens, less probably stigma associated with that terminology. The other change it made was to the amount of the credit that is available to taxpayers who can claim the credit. Prior to the change, the credit was equal to 5% of qualified wages, not to exceed $1,500 per qualified ex-felon. As of January 1, 2025, that increased to 15% of qualified wages, not to exceed $7,500 per qualified returning citizen. So a significant increase in the amount of the credit, and hopefully something that will incentivize business taxpayers to utilize the credit more. One of the new things that they added, however, was an annual credit cap. Previously, there was no credit cap, so there was no limitation on how much taxpayers could claim in any given year. This particular public act actually imposed a credit limit of $1 million per year. Now, I will say that previously it was a little used credit, so only about $50,000 per year was claimed for this particular credit. So unclear if we will reach that $1 million mark this year with the enhanced credit terms, but possible that we won't. However, with that credit limit, the department is tasked with ensuring that that limit is not exceeded. So one of the things that we will have to do to administer that cap is to create a portal or an application process where taxpayers will log in, enter the information for their claim, and have to be approved for that credit before they can actually claim it on their return. So that's something that will be available later in the year or possibly after the first of the year when tax filing season starts. Again, this is just kind of an assumption on my part that given how much this credit was used previously and the credit cap that's in place, that and I will make note also that they would be awarded on a first come first served basis. So if somebody applied for the credit and their application caused the cap to exceed $1 million, then their credit application would be denied. However, given the anticipation that we may not meet that $1 million credit, presumably everybody will be approved. So some of the additional terms that were changed, again, previously there was a definition of qualified ex-offender in the bill or in statute. So a qualified ex-offender was somebody who was convicted of a crime in Illinois or an offense in any other jurisdiction, not including any offense or attempted offense that was subject to a person to registration under the Sex Offender Registration Act. The individual also would have been sentenced to a period of incarceration in an Illinois Adult Correctional Center and was hired by the taxpayer within 3 years after being released from that Adult Correctional Center. new definition, which has changed to qualified returning citizen, again, retains the provisions from 1 and 2 from the previous slide. However, provision 3 is amended. So it ends the previous 3-year provision as far as when a individual has to be hired after release. So that would have ended for credits claimed for taxable years beginning on or before January 1, 2024. And it has increased that to 5 years. So beginning January 1, 2025, any individual hired by the taxpayer within 5 years after being released can be claimed for the credit. So that, in a nutshell, is the changes to the credit for wages paid to returning citizens. I have included a slide here with contact information from the department. I've got Brett Whitfield Tate, who is our division manager for individual processing division, and I have Robert Farling, who is our division manager for business processing division. Since presumably this tax credit would be utilized by businesses, my recommendation would be if you have any questions, you can reach out to Robert directly. His email and phone number is attached, and if those questions might be more appropriate for our individual processing division, then Robert can get you over to Brett to get the answers you need. So with that, I am happy to open it up to any questions.
Richard, I do have a question. Thank you so much again for that presentation. So how would a business owner get started here? If they wanted to obtain the paperwork, they wanted to begin the process of applying for this enhanced tax credit, what would they do?
Well, the application process should be somewhat brief. Like I said, the only purpose of that is to ensure that that $1 million credit cap is not exceeded. Um, so they would have to, a lot of this information would only be if we had to investigate whether or not somebody actually had qualified wages that qualified for the credit. That would probably be more of an audit function as opposed to something that we're going to review prior to awarding the credit.
And when will this open up in terms of when people can actually apply?
Well, it's going to be since it's for tax year 2025, so those returns won't be filed until 2026.
Okay.
So there really isn't any need to have that application available until the end of the year, if not after the first of the year, once tax filing season opens.
Okay, great. And my last question, you talked about a somewhat streamlined application process, Richard.
Mhm.
So that would consist, what essentially would that consist of? If you know what that application would look like, at least theoretically right now.
Yeah, it's not been developed yet,
Okay.
so I don't have any specifics that I can share. Um, but I would presume it would be something similar to how the credit is currently reported. So something, obviously would have to have, taxpayer name, taxpayer ID number, uh, how many individuals you are claiming for the credit, perhaps even the names and um, social security numbers for those individuals for which you're claiming the credit, qualified wages for each individual, 15% of those qualified wages not to exceed $7,500. So there'd probably be some type of business edits built into that application system to make sure that that credit cap per individual is not exceeded as well. So that's what I would envision that application process to kind of look like.
And your answer led me to my last question, even though I said my last question was my last question. I didn't see a cap in the number of employees that would be eligible for this for one business, right? So
That's correct.
what my understanding, yeah, right. So if you're a business and you bring on two formerly incarcerated individuals, you would be able to apply for two tax credits, right? One for each one of
Correct.
those.
Hmm.
Oh, great, great. Those are really all the questions that I have. I think the presentation was extremely helpful. Again, we're looking to get this information into the hands of as many small businesses as we possibly can because this is such a really significant increase in the tax credit for bringing on a formerly incarcerated individual, hiring a formerly incarcerated individual. So, Richard, thank you so much for your time. Thank you again for your partnership on enhancing this tax credit.
Well, thank you again for inviting me and anything we can do to help get the word out there. Obviously, the changes to the credit were intended to uh, help it incentivize its utilization a little bit more than it has been in the past. So hopefully we'll be successful with that effort.
Thank you so much.